Hey, what's up, internet? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel, hanging out with me for a little bit to talk about the best television show ever. As somebody who's contrarian by nature, my love of the Sopranos continues. It's one of the best reviewed shows of all time. I don't think I have a lot of novelty to add to it, but the show is deeply about mental health. So I have a lot to say about its representation of mental health. Season 3, in my opinion, was the best yet. This is my true, honest to goodness first watch of The Sopranos. I've never seen it before, and I'm slowly working through it. If you want to see me talk about season 1 and season 2, those videos are up earlierly recorded previously. They are up on this channel here. Go check those out and then come back for season 3. If you never watched The Sopranos, strong recommend. It holds up even 25 years later. 25 years through 2026. Here we are. Season 3 had some really great episodes. Season 3 included just some like lived experience of side characters, and I thought that was really well done and really added to the show. Season 3 had the climax of one of the arguably biggest relationships in Tony Soprano's life, and season 3 had some rough stuff but is real, and I think that was all really well done. It just continues to be a very compelling show, and the representations of mental health are overall pretty good. Like, the things that I would say aren't great are things that in 25 years we've changed maybe our understanding from the scientific community, the therapy side of things. Like, I don't think Melfi's a good therapist, but I think Melfi 25 years ago was probably doing very good standard care. But the representations of the characters as they struggle with their mental health remains pretty top notch. So I have a lot of issue with the therapy that gets done, while also really appreciating a lot of what goes on for the people and how their mental health is handled in the show. Season 3 starts off with an episode that I loved, which is just how much effort the FBI goes to bug Tony's basement and how little they get from it. Obviously, we don't know how much they get from it. It creates pressure at the beginning of the show, in the season, to see them bug Tony's basement and get away with it. Tony knows the FBI is watching him. He flips them off. He catcalls them when he sees them posted up outside his house. But they have a pretty intensive process for cutting the electricity, who's posing for who. Everybody has to keep eyes on different members of the family. And then they finally get a bugged lamp into the basement without anybody noticing. And it's a really good episode in, I think, the sense of, it's somebody who's like a cab and, fuck the police. Like, how much money gets spent on all of that, how many man hours go into a project like that to get literally no benefit, and just incredibly wasteful. And again, I think in 2001, whenever the season came out, like, sure, right? Like, I don't think people were probably viewing it that way, but I felt this way in 2014, 2012. Pick a year. Once I became aware of politics, that, like, oh, hey, America, we're the baddies. The carceral system we use here in America to police black and brown people and let rich white people get away with whatever they want has been a problem since the founding of our country, but has really come to a head here in the mid 2020s. And so this episode, I think, hits a little differently now when you're watching it, being like, man, what a waste. And also, if you were opposed to the police state 20 years ago, the FBI is just hiring white supremacists, You don't see Bruce Wayne and Batman in the same room, and you don't see Ice and the Proud Boys in the same room. So, um, that's that's what I'll say about that. The other episode, I'm skipping a bit in the season here. The other episode that I think was really good, that was not so much about Tony and the mob and the family, but was about some of the smaller characters. There were a lot of smaller characters, honestly, this season. I want to get the name right. Uh, Pine Barrens. It was directed by Steve Buscemi. Um, the of Big Lebowski fame. Steve Buscemi fans might be offended by that. Um, this was just Chris and Paulie botching picking up money from a Russian gangster who then flees into the snow, and because he grew up in Siberia, can handle the snow much better than Chris and Polly, who are in their designer shoes and aren't wearing mittens for some reason. And it's like funny, but also stressful. But like, again, this view of Chris as this made man. Finally, in season 3, he becomes a made man and he moves up in the family. And he realized that with moving up, everyone who's above him has also moved up. So he really doesn't feel like he's gotten that far ahead. He and Polly have some back and forth. He still owes Polly money. He takes a bad beat on running the gambling racket. And so, he falls behind a little bit. Polly's like hazing him for some reason, which I'm not a mob aficionado, so I don't understand the hazing of a made man. I think should be off limits, but Polly like goes and sniffs Adriana's underwear drawer when he like shows up at 3 in the morning to haze Christopher, and Christopher goes to Tony about it. Tony talks to Polly about it. It's like, you need to apologize. That's obviously crossing the line. And then Polly doesn't do that and instead just mad at Christopher. And so later in the season, we get Christopher and Polly having to like camp out in a broken down van out in the middle of the woods in the winter. And it's just like, if you watch any of my reviews of superhero movies, I'll talk about this a lot. I think the story of these larger than life characters in superhero settings, but these like caricatures, I don't know how accurate it is. I obviously have read criticism of The Sopranos that says it paints Italian Americans as all being mobsters is obviously bad and wrong. So I don't know how accurate it is from that perspective. But like the perspective of like these two people who don't have a ton of lived experience, have a ton of street smarts, but only for like a very narrow range of experience, right? And we see that earlier in the show when they go to Italy and meet some of the original OG mafia family over there, and it's like, don't speak Italian. And so we have sort of this culmination of these guys who are tough guys, who run their local street, who run the local clubs, who have the surrounding area and the surrounding people under their thumb, but like don't have great skills outside of that. Again, they have people for these things, but they're maybe not necessarily super knowledgeable themselves. And somebody with a unique sort of will and skill set that they don't have can really fly under the radar and get away. This I have to imagine comes back up, the falling out with the Russian mob, but I don't know. There's a back and forth with Russians throughout this season. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. No, we'll stay on track. There's a back and forth with Russians throughout the seasons for various reasons, but this particular time frame doesn't necessarily get this doesn't get resolved, and so yeah. But Pine Barrens and that first opening, FBI getting the wire, the bug in the Soprano house are like, Tony's in them. The other members of the family are in these episodes, but they're really sort of character driven by the FBI in the first instance, and then later with Christopher and Polly. And I think that it's just like sort of refreshing for shows that have been on the air for a long time and shows that have this type of thing. I think it's sort of rewarding to take a breather every now and again. And I think it's one of the things that like superhero stories and some of the television shows get wrong now is like constantly needing to up the stakes with every episode. Sometimes it's nice to have a side quest episode. And like when it happens all the time, like with the X Files, where it's a creature of the week kind of thing, it can sort of drag. But these are nice breaks with where the rest of the storyline is going, especially with some of the other storylines that take some time to set up. Like these are good episodes to build and give us a look at like how much stress and strain these people are under while they're quote unquote doing really well within the mafia. Like this isn't a healthy lifestyle. Christopher's a made man and he's not thriving. Paulie's a made man and he's not thriving. Paulie's dealing with a lot of the same things Tony dealt with of getting his mom into care and having an aging parent. And, you know, what is the retirement plan of a mob boss? Like, there isn't a great one. And so there's certainly that thread, and we have Junior's story in season 3 is seeing everybody around him die as he also is coming up for his trial is starting soon, and he is also dealing with a cancer diagnosis that he keeps secret for a while until he has to start chemo because surgery didn't get it all out. And there's just like this pending sort of there's this thread of as they're all aging, everything's getting worse. And then Christopher is really sort of the example opposite that as a younger guy who's becomes a made man and like the struggle as these other guys above him have sort of plateaued. And so he doesn't really feel like he's getting ahead that much, which I think, again, viewing it 25 years later is like, yeah, that's fascinating that that was sort of the idea around capitalism at that point when we're definitely seeing 25 years later into late stage capitalism. That's how I'd say most millennials and Gen Z feel, where like coming out better educated and having more knowledge and a wider skill set than a lot of previous generations. Arguably, some things that aren't really based in reality or aren't based in like skills. You know, millennials classically are the generation that knows how to convert a PDF, but you know, also watch survivalists on YouTube and don't know how to start a fire yourself. So that's been, I don't know. I'm sure that is for millennials. Gen Z certainly has that. Um, but again, there's a good mix because the show isn't just Tony and his family. The show really is Tony's biological family and Tony's mob family, and what are the juxtapositions between those things, and how does it play out on his mental health, navigating those two families. And I think these smaller sort of side quest episodes about the mob stuff really drive home how much stress and pressure there is for everyone involved there. And then we have the family stuff where Tony's mom, Livia, is been recorded and bugged at the nursing home, and then she dies, right? And so season 3 sort of kicks off with this FBI episode, and then Tony's stressing because the court stuff's coming up. And I believe what I've read online. I didn't watch the show when it came out. I wasn't, up to date 25 years ago what was going on. But the actress who plays Tony's mom just died in real life, and so they had to adapt the show for that. But I think it worked really well, where Tony feels a ton of relief that his mom has died, not just because of the court case, but because of how toxic their relationship was. And Janice, Tony's sister, really steps in and becomes the new obnoxious character. The funeral episode was fascinating because Livia was not particularly well liked because she was pretty much mean to everybody in her life, especially in her old age. But everybody has to respect Tony. Tony's trying to respect her wishes, which were to not have a funeral, to not have a big to-do. So they're just going to have like a low-key party, which again, like is a mob boss, at their big fancy house and catering and all the stuff. I don't know, that's catering again. This food is a huge part of the show. But Janice ignores all this to make it a whole big thing. And at the wake, she like tries to get everybody to say stuff, and that's not something Livia wanted, and nobody has anything nice to say, but they have to because Tony's there, but Tony doesn't want it to happen. So everybody's like reading that Tony's mad, but Tony's mad at Janice for sort of doing something that his mom specifically didn't want. And like the family dynamics of this are just really accurate. I'm recording in January now, but November and December, all I talk about in therapy is family of origin drama and holiday stress, because holiday stress brings up that family of origin drama, having to deal with people who don't necessarily know you as a full individuated adult, adding another generation if you're a parent, and now you have your elderly parents and you have your children and you're in the middle generation and navigating all of that, and it's just this pressure cooker. And so we have holidays, yes, but certainly weddings and funerals are the times that really bring out family drama regularly for folks. And it's these high stress points where, again, there's this expectation to get along. There is an expectation built in to a wedding of joyous celebration and a funeral of like somber, respectful remembrance. And that's not how families exist all the time. That's not how families exist most of the time. So meeting those societally created expectations is really hard because they're not based on anything. And then meeting those societally based expectations when your family has never really been able to do that in the first place becomes nigh impossible. And it's a fascinating watch. I think everybody plays their role really good. Carmela and her dad get into it because of how awful Livia was for all these years, and it's stressful because, again, everybody's under this pressure to be respectful to Tony, but like Janice is the one person who really gets away with not respecting Tony, and she's not in the mob family, so there's not a lot anyone can do about it. But again, it's this source of continued frustration for Tony, where he feels bad at the relief he feels from his mom dying, but then he feels this ongoing pressure of Janice. Janice then takes over the house and kicks the Russian caretaker out, steals her prosthetic leg. So that's the other thing where there's this back and forth with the Russians. But like, Tony's got two sisters, and one is hardly in the show because she's just like out of the family and doesn't want to deal. And their interactions are practical. And then Janice is like, oh, Janice is stressful for me to watch as somebody who does family therapy, and like to have that in-law dynamic pop up. I often relate to Melfi as the therapist in the show. And so what would I do in that situation? And again, like, that's a very real depiction of having a client coming in, complain about this family member who they don't have to see all that often, but is still a huge source of stress in their life. So it's really accurate. It's really well done. The funeral dynamic, I think, is pretty well done too. And so really, really fascinating perspective. Again, like a tight, the episode doesn't really work as a standalone like some of those other ones do, but like season 3, the payoff from season 1 and season 2 of these family dynamics we've seen for the older aspect of the generation, Livia, Tony, Janice, and then the show shifts now to Meadows going off to college, AJ's in high school causing trouble, and so Tony just never really gets a breather. And like, Tony's a bad person, right? Like, that's the show. So I'm not like poor guy, but like, that's a realistic depiction of what happens over life stage development. Is again, there's not really a time of like easy peasy. I would argue, I'm 37, so this is looking back with some hindsight. I would argue that individuation stage, that 18 to 26, sort of figuring yourself out, being out on your own, is low pressure, but also with the financial strain and the late stage capitalism, like, it's really hard to get ahead. So it's not like there's no pressure, but I would argue there are fewer expectations because you are separating from your family of origin. And so you're not so focused on meeting everybody's expectations. Obviously, your mileage will vary with that, if that was your experience or not. Not everybody individuates particularly well. Not every family is open or supportive to individuation. Not everybody comes back together with that individuated adult human and sees them as an adult in this family ecosystem, which is why I have good job security. Um, the other, I think, most sort of compelling thing. Oh, I'm going to bitch a little bit, and then I'm going to have a lot of sympathy. Melfi invites Carmela into therapy and just does like a horrific job with it. I'm an LMFT. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. How I started doing therapy was doing couples therapy first, right? So a lot of therapists will get their LPC, just sort of a jack of all trades therapist. You're a licensed practitioner, counselor degree. You're not necessarily specialized in anything. Um, and then they'll tack on the family stuff later. And again, like when I say tack it on, like go to school and study it, which is good. I didn't do that. I just started doing couples work right away. The first session I ever saw live as a student behind a one-way mirror was a couple session. I saw that and was like, this is what I want to do. And my internship site was where the Family Therapy Training Institute was. So I wasn't in the Family Therapy Training Institute. I was a grad student, but I was interning under all these licensed marriage and family therapists who were really great instructors for licensed marriage and family therapy. And then I did my postgrad right away at the Family Therapy Training Institute. And so I didn't ever switch from individual therapy to then having to learn how to do couples. I learned how to do couples first. I learned how to do family therapy first. And so in a lot of ways, I see other therapists who don't have that training, don't have that background, really struggle. And so this is a really clumsy attempt by a therapist who doesn't have the training to think that couples therapy is just individual therapy with two people in the room. And it's totally different, right? And so I do couples therapy with one person in the room. Everything I do is relational because humans are relational. You're relating to your neighbors, your coworkers, your partners, your lovers, your whatever, right? Like we exist in all these different overlapping ecosystems. And so even when I'm doing individual therapy, it's still relational. And that's a different perspective than maybe what an LPC has or an LCSW has. And so I see a lot of therapists who aren't trained to do couples therapy think they can just do individual therapy with multiple people in the room. And it's a totally different thing. And so, yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't help. It's interesting to sort of see from the character's perspective. I think the alliance they both felt against Melfi, again, like Tony's prickly with Melfi, and protective of Carmela in a way where when Carmela's not there, Tony can just sort of come in and vent and complain and it's fine. And Carmela doesn't like Melfi. Melfi refers Carmela to see her own individual therapist. That individual therapist says, you're married to a mob boss, which is immoral of you, and you shouldn't do that. So I won't take your money and you should get divorced, which is also like wildly terrible therapy. Principled in the sense of like not taking her money, I guess, but that's wild. And so, yeah, like that's done really poorly. And then sort of with no foreshadowing, no warning, which again, I think is accurate and like realistic and where the show did a good job is Melfi gets sexually assaulted in the parking garage and like nobody handles it well. The police botch the investigation. They lose track of some of the, they lose the custody chain of her rape kit. And so they can't press any charges, even though like they know who did it. And it's done really poorly. The guy Melfi is dating handles it very poorly, and uh, just like nobody does any good, and she has to sort of suffer through it on her own. You can see her trying to keep it together in session. There's this drive of doing her job gets her mind off of it, and so that's helpful. But then like that's where it happened, and so it's very triggering to be in the parking garage. She has this pull towards telling Tony about it because she goes to like a local pizza shop and sees the picture of the guy who raped her on like the employee of the month board and, runs out of there, freaks out correctly. And she has this idea of like, the police let me down. My partner let me down. There is no justice here. There's this pull towards Tony's idea of like mob justice, like might makes right, where she slips it out to Tony what happened. And also that, here's the guy that maybe Tony would take action and that would be a relief and feel good. And she decides not to do it. And at that time, reading 25 years later, it was a fairly revolutionary thing in media to not have the female character have the male character be her hero. And so I think that's really interesting from like a sort of social critique and from looking at why this show was so good and has maintained its status as being so good is like it is stuff like that watching it 25 years later doesn't necessarily seem revolutionary. I don't know that I would watch the show and think of Melfi or Carmela as being revolutionary female characters. They're certainly not like feminists. And I can see where like right in season 1 there's this whole thing on like if you eat pussy, you're a pansy, and no self-respecting man would admit to pleasing his woman, question mark, which is weird because again, like we make fun of Andrew Tate for being like, is it gay to eat pussy? Um, because I don't know, right wing grifters are going to do the right wing grift thing, and like masculinity as a never ending moving goalpost is a really great grift, I guess, for certain people. But so again, I don't know that this show necessarily came across as like, look at these strong women being feminists. Uh, and like Melfi, I can see where in at the time and place that the show came out that like that was pretty revolutionary. And I think as a therapist, this is probably what would happen. Again, like Melfi would not tell her clients about it. There's a shift in therapists showing up as real humans. There's a shift in therapists owning their own shit. And like it's a fine line. I was still taught, you know, 16, 17 years ago now, that self-disclosure is a big no-no. But I was probably that first generation of therapists who was like, yeah, but like we know that the economic downturn is affecting us too. We know that being in a recession is affecting us too. We know that being in a war that's been going on for 20 years affects us too. Like the things that are affecting our clients are also affecting us. And so acting as if it doesn't affect us or we're unaware of it or this blank slate can make our clients feel bad or can alienate our clients in what their experience is very normal. And then that we're making it feel like we as therapists are above it. And so our clients should be too. And so there is this sense of like client therapists owning their own shit. You know, lots of therapists have chronic health issues and they're just very upfront with their clients about that stuff, rightly so. And I argued with my sister years ago on like eating in front of my clients. Like I don't have a lunch break all the time. Sessions run late, clients come in crisis, stuff happens. Like am I not supposed to eat in front of my clients? And my sister, who's not a therapist, was like, I'm not paying you to have your like share your lunch with me. Like I'm paying you for therapy. I want your full attention. And I was like, that's so preposterous. Um, but so like real life example is like I do know that still sort of exists out there. That idea that therapists are supposed to be above it all. But I think for something like this is a really hard disclosure and also yeah. But what happens in the show that I thought was really interesting is as Melfi sort of deals with having to deal with the idea that Tony could be her attack dog, deciding not to do that. And then because there's like this dream sequence with the Rottweiler, it's whatever, eye rolling about dreams having actual meaning. That's not backed by science, y'all. Dreams are random. Um, and so all of that's going on, but Melfi is still talking to her own therapist, and her own therapist still thinks of Tony as being this antisocial guy who's a mobster and kills people, and therefore he's a horrible person and he has no feelings and he can't. And he's the only person that we see in the show who like gets up and like puts his hand on Melfi's shoulder in like a comforting, compassionate, like, yo, like you're fine. I'm here for you. What do you need? I got you. And it's like this very tender moment where we see Melfi has to see Tony differently. She's unable to accept his help. She's unable to pursue the help that at least some part of her brain wants from Tony. And he's kind and comforting in the way that like an empathic person would be. And so she has to acknowledge his empathy. She has to acknowledge his real feelings here. And that's a shift moving forward then, because it's other people continue and have told her to drop him as a client, to not see him, blah, 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 blah. And she has, I think, a lot more compassion. She views him differently because of his compassion, leads her to have different compassion for him, which again, I think is the perk of therapists showing up as people in the office. Is it normalizes our clients' experience, but it also changes the way that we have to show up for our clients. We're not attached. We're people with feelings too, and that helps not just validate what they're experiencing, but it's this feedback loop then, right, of working through emotions and owning them and communicating through them and modeling how to do that well and safely and respectfully, consensually, all that stuff. So I think it's really great, honestly, and also, you know, lying to your clients about getting into a car accident instead of saying that you were raped, just like, right, yeah. But again, I mean, That was, I think, a wild, probably representation for the show, and also, like, that's how trauma works. That's how I talked about this in another video for my 2025 year wrap up. One of the books that I really liked has, a sexual assault that just comes out of nowhere, and and then the person has to sort of go on with their life. And I think as a dude, as a male, like, that's not something I'm particularly aware of. As a feminist, I'm aware that women constantly have to be aware of safety in a way that men do not. But again, like, that's a cognitive awareness, it's intellectual awareness. It's not something I think about very often. I'm not very many people's targets unless I'm traveling internationally, at which people want to pickpocket me or take advantage of me because I'm American. But, like, I'm 6'3", 220, 210. I don't know. My weight fluctuates. I'm a bigger dude. I have a lanky volleyball build, but, like, I'm a tall dude, big beard, long hair. Like, I'm not an easy mark for somebody who's looking to overpower someone or, take advantage of somebody that way. And so it's just sort of, again, that idea. I talk about this in my consultation group with other therapists. Like, I was taught as a therapist, where's the door? Be aware of your exit. Always sit between your client and the door so you can get there first if anything were to happen. And, like, that never resonated for me as a therapist, because most of my clients are not bigger than me. I can think of, in 16, 17 years of doing therapy, I can think of 3 or 4 people who have been, like, far, like, noticeably more physically imposing than me. And that's not like a brag. It's just like, right, you have to be a big person to be noticeably bigger than me. And then there needs to be a certain degree of um, intensity to our work for that to ever even register for me. And that's not how females have to live in our society. And again, like, rightly so, because Melfi's a good example of somebody who has a lot of power, is privileged in a lot of ways in our modern society, and still there's no justice. There's no accountability for what happens to her. And so, yeah, that storyline, like, was a surprise. I've, again, first watch of The Sopranos, and also have avoided pretty much every spoiler for the show. Most spoilers, most minute spoilers for the show. Um, yeah, what else did I want to talk about? Um, Tony's racist, which isn't great. But this leads to some different panic attacks, and Melfi and Tony realize food is a component to his panic attacks, which, again, I think is interesting. And also, that's not how everybody's anxiety works. So interesting, fascinating. That is how some people's worked. It's like a good therapy breakthrough they shared together, and not necessarily the norm. And then we have Jackie Jr., who is the former mob boss's son, who asked Tony to keep him out of family business, which Tony does. And then he starts dating Meadow, and then he gets into family business because Ralphie was dating Jackie Jr.'s mom now, is in the family and becomes a capo, and he lets Jackie get involved a little bit, and then Jackie cheats on Meadow, and then Jackie Jr. eventually has to die because he keeps doing things that he shouldn't be doing. He shoots up a made man's poker game trying to emulate the way that Tony and Jackie Sr., his father, became made men. And so there's this whole thing. Ralphie, who's not his stepdad, but is dating his mom, also, like, kills one of the strippers that he'd been sleeping with after finding out she's pregnant. And so, like, there's a lot of awful stuff happening on in the mafia. And again, the difference, what we're seeing with Tony is he struggles because he really cared about Jackie Jr. as Jackie's kid. He really cares about the stripper being murdered because she's about Meadow's age. And he's, like, deeply protective of Meadow, and he doesn't have the emotional maturity to, like, put this all together. And this is where, like, I don't think Melfi's a good enough therapist. She can prescribe, but she's not actually that good at the therapy part of this. Where she's like there, and so Tony starts having an affair with one of Melfi's other clients, and who's, like, not particularly stable, which Melfi, in her therapy sort of way, tries to warn Tony of, and he ignores it. And then what Melfi does finally put together is, like, you're dating your mom. You're attracted to this unstable person because you want your mom's love, which, like, I think is accurate in the fictional sense, in the way that this was written as a story. But like, sure, as much as we can tell those sort of narratives in our people's lives, I don't think it's Freudian that we all want to fuck our moms and kill our dads. I think it is far more of like there are these patterns that feel comfortable to our brains, and sometimes we repeat them unintentionally. It's a little fictionalized, obviously, but um, again, Melfi hits on that, which I think is correct, but also sort of is missing this other piece. Some of it's because Tony can't be totally open and honest because of his work, but also that's the whole thing. And then season 3, so we have Jackie Jr. dying. We have the ending with the funeral, and AJ is sort of experiencing a bit of getting in trouble, and then he also makes the football team, and then he becomes the team captain of the freshman team. Come on. Come on. And then he has a panic attack. And so Tony is becoming aware of like, hey, this thing for mental health is genetic, and he really hates that. He hates that he passed it on. And there's this like lingering fear of death. Carmela is concerned about a biopsy, and she finds out she doesn't have cancer, but we have Uncle Junior dealing with cancer and the court case. So like there's these swirling sort of stressors going on, and the show, I think, really navigates exceptionally well the big overarching existential dread with the day in, day out mundane dread of family life, and then the sort of fantastical mafia lifestyle stress. And it just remains particularly compelling. I really, 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 really liked season 3. I thought it was really good. I thought every character got a lot of screen time. The main characters got a lot of screen time. People were doing things that like real people would do. Again, is there sort of the fanciful background of the mob? Yeah, but like not like the mob doesn't exist. I'm not dismissing that. But yeah, it's just really compelling television, and the way that people handle their mental health, the way people try and hide things, the things they try and keep to themselves, the things that are shameful or embarrassed of, all are like really good representations of how real people struggle with this stuff. And so for, again, a show that's 25 years old, I don't think they get all the therapy points right. I think they got them right for 25 years ago, but that part hasn't aged well. But the timelessness, I think, of the human experience continues to be really, really great. So I have gushed long enough about how much I liked season 3. It's hard to sort of do these season recaps. Again, I'm trying to sort of stay focused on some of the mental health stuff, but I also have to, I don't want to just do like a straight plot review. But if there's stuff that people want to hear about, if there's stuff you're interested in, if you're a fan of the show, drop down in the comments, let me know. Happy to chat about this stuff. And it's always easier for me to talk about this stuff when I know what other people want to hear. So appreciate all the feedback, likes, subscribes, all those YouTube things. That's super helpful. And people who drop in the comments, I have a list of things that people have told me to do a review of or watch, and I am working on it. Season 4 of Sopranos is probably going to take priority. Have some other stuff recorded. I just watched a lot of movies this year, which is really great, and catching up on some of these old sort of classic shows has been really good too. So drop down in the comments if there's something you would like me to review or talk about specifically. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel today. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else.